Coming straight off our latest Kairos guide, we are now going through a tier list of the Lord of Change and his minions, the Tzeentch tier list, and this of course is going to be campaign centric, and I've even actually taken the time to cut out each of the unit cards because all the online tier lists, they were pretty unclear, and you're going to notice a few things about Tzeentch which won't make you scratch your head because you'll see some tier 3 units which Tzeentch has placed in tier 4, but that is a feature, not a bug, and that's because you have insane ways to bolster your growth with the Lord of Change if you can provide the income to fund that construction. But let's stay focused on the units here, and we're going to kick it straight away with a few additions that I've made to the list because this is meant to be an educational resource. So if you're new to the faction, I'm going to group the units that are kind of similar and explain what they do past their wacky names. So let's get straight into it. Our very first entry is actually going to be a legendary lord, and this is purely for the awareness of it. You can get Sartorial on turn 4 guaranteed. Check out the Kairos guide. He's probably the lord that you will be playing with first. Getting an Exalted Lord of Change off the opening turns is insanely good. Whilst he doesn't really offer more than being a regular Lord of Change, he does have a pretty cool trait to start the game with, and Tzeentch has some excellent items so you can make him a beat stick very early on, and you'll see in the walkthrough that he's very, very useful, used alongside with Kairos, to come battering units off the top of the towers and walls and taking siege settlements very, very quickly. And if you're not playing as Kairos, he's going to be totally dead by turn 3. Yes, if you'd like to dip your toe in and try out Tzeentch, it's a difficult faction, but Kairos is still the best first start for you if you own Warhammer Free. Now, Shadows of Change you can do without, and I would just hold off till that's on special because honestly, it's still a little bit expensive for what it is, and I'll let you make your own decision and see if you like the other two lords that accompany it, as well as the unique Changeling campaign. I personally really like it, but it's not going to be for everyone. But the Champions of Chaos DLC is something I absolutely do recommend. This DLC gives you one lord from each of the Chaos gods, and this content provides some additional mortal units that can be used for the demonic faction. So let's just quickly do the distinction between demonic units and immortal units. Demonics are, well, demons. They're here in this plane, and once they become unstable enough, they will be banished from existence from whence they came. So they crumble similar to undead, so they're a bit more difficult to keep alive because they don't rout. Mortals, on the other hand, have feelings, which also includes being fear and petrified enough to run from the field and be routed, but often living another day, meaning they're more easy to keep around. Humans that have turned to Chaos can either be unmarked, or they can get marked by the Chaos god of their choice, and the Mark of Zinch is very, very good. It provides a barrier which allows the first few strikes of them getting hit to not lose any hit points, and if they stay out of combat or avoid getting hit, that barrier will replenish. There are plenty of ways in your army, thanks to your heroes, predominantly, that will allow you to recharge your barriers quicker, and barriers are incredibly useful, particularly for being able to cycle out your frontline units whilst they're resting. They'll also replenish that barrier, and for your more mobile units, they can cycle charge in, do a bit of damage, and then pull out, and they will not have even lost a single hit point so long as that barrier holds. Recharge the barrier, and then do it again. The Mark of Zinch also bestows magic attacks on the user, meaning every one of your strikes will cut straight through physical resistance. Starting off with the iconic confused balls of random energy, the horror units. In the lore, the pink horrors are the jovial, more powerful units, but when killed, will split into two smaller, far more angry and embittered blue horrors. Whilst they don't split in two in the game, you will find the blue horror units twice as numerous as the pink horror units, and they prove to be the frontliners. Well, they're classed as a melee unit, but they do have 4 rounds of the Zinchian fire. It does pretty decent damage for what it's worth, and their melee stats are strong enough to at least hold the line a little bit. But I'd like to clear up one massive preconception with blue and pink horrors of Zinch, and it's because you see them so often in Zinch gameplay that you think, wow, this is a one-stop unit that can handle everything, and that is totally not true. Now, don't worry, the pink horrors are definitely way better, but the beauty of the blue horrors is you can get them virtually anywhere by global recruitment, and once you've acquired your 10th settlement, you can globally recruit them in a single turn. And kind of similar to the Kislev Race, they just make every army a little bit better. They can make use anywhere. On the front line, standing behind the front line to unload their rounds and then charge in. If a unit gets damaged, pull them back so they can regenerate their shields. With melee stats in the low 20s, they're not going to be winning a lot of engagements, but they're not going to fold as quickly as typical archers do, and they do have that barrier. Anyone unfamiliar with demons, you'll notice that they all have very low armor. Blue horrors only have 5 armor and pink only have 25 armor, but that's because the primary defense of demons comes in physical resistance. They have a base 20 physical resistance, which means washing off 20% 50% of any damage from swords or bows that hit them. Very, very nice. The pink horrors are a straight up upgrade. They have 20 ammunition and 130 range, so this is your premier range unit, but they're even better in melee. Still not amazing, but for a tier 2 unit, they will do fine. Horrors remain a mainstay well into the mid and arguably even into the late game simply because they're so cheap, affordable, and accessible. Just a quick reminder guys, if you are enjoying the video, please consider liking and subscribing, it really helps out. Ask any question in the comments, I answer everything, and if you'd like to talk strategy, feel free to join the Discord. Cheers. When building a new army, if you do have the time, get that barracks up to tier 3 and you will get the Exalted Pink Horror. Just once again, a straight up upgrade, enjoying that 20% physical resistance, making up for the atrocious 25 armor. But the melee stats are actually quite nice. 30 melee attack, 38 melee defense. These stats are more than enough to buy them enough time for you to focus down that annoying pesky eagle that has flown into your backline to ravage your horrors. Of course, their value comes from doing a base 30 missile damage with 7 of that being armor piercing, laughing hysterically, lobbing magic over the front row. They form a valuable piece of any formation. Even my late game armies seem to find between 3 and 6 Exalted Pink Horrors simply because they're so cheap and they just sit in the middle, get some ranks on it, and it will be able to still hit very heavy come tier 5. One of the most powerful tools at all the demons' fingertips is the ability to summon demons onto the battlefield, and man, horrors are an excellent summoning, being able to lob fire into the backs of enemies. Even if they've got their shields ready, they won't be facing these horrors when you open a freaking portal behind them, lob their ammo, and then charge them straight in. Being a temporary unit, having only 4 ammunition, really suits these blue horrors down to a T. This summoning is attached to the skill, Locus of Transmogrification. Hiring a Herald of Zinch Lord is one way of getting it, but the better way to get it is through the Iridescent Horror. This is your most accessible hero. You can take either the Law of Metal or Zinch. You can take whichever you prefer, but just my playstyle, I like to have my horrors under the Law of Metal. Then I get my sorcerers to be the Lord of Zinch to ensure that if I pair them up, I have both laws of magic in any army. It's just how I like to roll. I like the variety. But gaining, of course, replenishment is going to be key. You will have slightly lackluster, well actually very lackluster defensive and attack stats in melee, but you can easily avoid melee being on a Chariot or on a Disc of Zinch. There's a lot of discourse as to which one is the better one. It's easier to avoid being on a small, nimble mount on the Disc, but of course there is cycle charge opportunity in the Burning Chariot. The mutually exclusive abilities are all quite nice. It is very, very hard to turn down summoning 2 units of blue horrors every battle, but if you have enough summoning, you can always boost your Winds of Magic. Getting any barracks up to tier 3 will increase the cap on this, and you will end up with the ability to get plenty of them. Whilst there can be some tough decisions in your major settlements, the minor settlements are fairly standard and straightforward. You will always want the income building, the Weave of Time, it gives you a bit of growth, but more importantly, income, and you can get more income by having high Winds of Magic in that province. After getting income in all those minor settlements, the next priority will probably be to get a resource building to provide some extra grimoires as well as a percentage increase to your income. But you can further compound that percentage with the corruption building. Get that up to tier 3 for another 15%. If you can afford it, the growth building is very, very hard to look past, gaining an extra buff with high Winds of Magic, and it is insane how quickly Tzeentch can build up their provinces with these amazing growth buildings. However, once you hit tier 4, tier 5, you'll probably want to do away with them, and at that point, you really don't have anything else to build but the barracks. It maxes out at tier 3, making it a perfect fit for your minor provinces, and it will give you an extra iridescent horror. And yes, some units have the ability to summon pink horrors onto the field, and they work just as well, and the unit that brings them onto the field is the Cultist of Zinch. You will certainly have these around in some capacity before tier 3 because they are absolutely vital to the new cult system, and if you have not seen the new cult system, please check out the first half of the Kairos video, which is the 10 critical tips, because do not sleep on the cult's rework. I cannot overstate enough how good it is. It completely changes the way Zinch works, and it was one of the hardest guides I've had to make because there were so many options of how to play now. The way you reach now with Zinch isn't through expansion of force, it is by by cults and manipulation, which I absolutely love. Placing cults will increase your grimoires, and in 10 turns can create a Magnus cultist, which will then be able to spread 3 random cults anywhere in the map, and you can do this multiple times. So before you know it, you'll have an entire network of cult buildings, which with the branching plans building, you will slowly grow, and each cult will just generate more and more grimoires, allowing you to do whatever you want with the changing of the ways. So you're going to want at least 1 or 2 of your cultists out there spreading the word of Tzeentch, which means not having them in your army, so you're not going to have as many high level cultists around. They bring the law of fire to Tzeentch. They're the only fire casters, and this is my favorite law of magic, a bit hard to give up, as well as they can also increase the movement of the army they're a part of. Now, normally this is a quintessential thing which you can't go about, but if you're not trying to snowball around the map, you don't miss it quite as much as you would with, say, an army like Crone, which is all about keeping that rampage going. So I do say prioritize your cults, but are they a slouch inside your armies? Absolutely not. At level 13, get Gate of Zinch, keep leveling it up, and you will get 3 casts of summoning pink auras every single battle, and then the next point will give you a freaking Lord of Change to drop onto the battlefield. So keep 1 slot free for a cultist to go around placing new cults, but all the others, keep them in your armies because they can do a lot of heavy lifting. A steed at level 4 means they can run around and cast with impunity, and putting them on the war shrine will increase the casting power of your casters. By the time you get them on this mat, you can have them sitting back because you'll have better units to do the more mobile field operations. Now, when you level up your capital anywhere, you can choose for it to be leveled up as either a bastion or a portal. The bastion will give you a reduction to the upgrade of your military buildings, whereas the portal will do your infrastructure buildings. And since infrastructure is what you're really about, the first 3 tiers up to tier 3, just stick with the portal. These savings will really add up to help you get your economy going, but after tier 4, building up those military buildings, increasing those hero caps, this is the point where you should switch over to the bastion and then get those sweet percentage reductions on those very expensive military buildings. But this means in the early stages you'll only be able to hire the blue horrors, but you know what, that's okay. So if you make your main capital a bastion, you'll be able to build the Marauders spears straight off the bat, and is it worth it? Well, they're not bad. They do deal anti-large, and they've got pretty decent stats. 37 melee defense is nothing to sneeze at. However, as mentioned, you really should be keeping down the portal line for these very formative turns, which means you won't have access to this unit until tier 2. There's some good argument to have a couple on the flanks to protect you, or if you're going to go against some heavy cavalry or large units, they will provide a decent answer, and as previously mentioned, spamming horrors will not work against everything despite what the internet says. However, their axe-wielding brethren are nowhere near as useful, only dealing normal damage, which you can do perfectly well with your horrors. But perhaps a hot take, I don't hire either of these units virtually ever. You should build this military building very early in order to get some legendary heroes onto the field, which means you will have access to Forsaken as well as Zangors, and both of these units are excellent and essentially retire the Marauders before they ever left the house. Because you can simply build the Mortal Barracks and get Forsaken. Forsaken are a significantly big step up from Marauders, notably more expensive, but absolutely worth it. Terrible melee defense, but pretty good armor, so they should stick around for quite a while, particularly in the early turns. However, if you have the Shadows of Change DLC, you get Zangors instead, and Zangors, I just can't explain it. I just love this unit. On paper, it looks so similar to the Forsaken, but there's just some subtleties which I think make it much better. The better melee defense means against stronger enemies that will actually hit you, they will be able to defend them much better. They have a silver shield, blocking 55% of all arrows that come their way. Both Forsaken and Zangors have abilities which will increase their aggressiveness the longer they're in battle, but the Zangors do sit in a looser formation with 120 units, so they cover a lot of ground. But there's some very good argument to take Forsaken and just pick your poison. Leveling up to tier 3 will unlock the Spawn of Zinch, and it's another monstrous unit. On first glance, this unit looks quite powerful. They have sundering attacks that will deliver a -30 penalty to anyone they hit, relatively strong attacks, and they do bring Siege Attacker, which can be hard to get early on with Tzeentch, so they do that, but The 16 units are absolutely massive, and 42 speed isn't terrible, but it's honestly not enough to avoid the myriad of bolts and arrows that will come their way, so they are just so difficult to keep alive. So in a siege situation or controlled terrain, very strong unit, and they just will not die. They are unbreakable, they won't move, and they are surprisingly hard to kill. I mean, they've got 8,700 hit points off the bat. It is not easy to take these guys down. In a combined armed force, you are likely to come across units that can take them out quite easily. Their large size and small model count means when they do get pinned down and start losing hit points, it's going to be pretty hard to keep them alive. So we've established we want lines of horrors lobbing fire over some form of front line, be it blue horrors or maybe a couple of Forsaken or Zangors. However, we can get some much needed mobility on the battlefield by using the plethora of flying units, which certainly is a strength of Tzeentch. But let's just start with the Humble Fury. Yes, they're a very overlooked unit, and I can see why they are hard to keep alive. But honestly, in the early turns or having to raise a crisis army somewhere, a unit of these can do some surprisingly good things. This applies for every flying unit I will mention in this tier list, but the shields are just indispensable. Normally multi-unit flyers are very hard to keep alive, but when you have the shields, that's okay. If they catch a few arrows, pull them back, regenerate the shields. This fragile unit can be used to bait and harass enemy archers or artillery if they're taking the defensive position. Making very clear here, this is a unit you should only ever hire in a crisis or in the early turns for some battlefield flexibility. Some of your best units come from the Fiery Servant building, which means at tier 2 you will get access to Screamers. This is a difficult unit to use, and your micro skills will depend on the mileage you get from them. If you're not very good at micro, you will likely think that this is a D tier unit, but as previously stated, getting armor piercing and anti-large in these early turns is quite difficult, and this unit brings both. Out of 60 damage, 40 of it is armor piercing with a 25 bonus versus large. 16 units of quick nimble screamers. They can vanguard deploy, so dive them in, but make sure you very quickly dive them back out, and if in doubt, put them at the back of your army in safety, or they won't be there when you go back to use them again. But they're only 175 upkeep, so just 1 or 2 units of these can provide tremendous value against monsters or cavalry. If you like the Screamers, you're going to love the Cockatrice. This is an excellent upgrade from the Screamer, essentially being a single beast. It moves fast, has armor piercing, is mortal, so instead of crumbling away, it will fly away and retreat. And just like the Screamers, having one on the far left and on the far right of your armies will provide incredible strategic opportunity. Melee stats in the 40s, really nice armor piercing damage, 90 speed, and a petrifying gaze ability which gradually slows an enemy over 30 seconds until they are completely halted. Those of you who struggle with Screamers and anything else with demonic instability will breathe a sign of relief with this unit, because essentially it's just a good old dependent beastie which just flies away when it gets scared. Another unit that brings armor piercing at tier 3 is the Centors of Zinch. However, of course, this is a cavalry equivalent with great weapons, accompanying those nice beastman buffs which do increase the damage of the unit, as well as being around casters will also increase the damage they inflict. In the early stages, an enemy coming at you with several armoured units will need a response, and this can actually be a pretty reliable response, and honestly the only threats you won't be able to handle between Chaos Warriors and your Pink Horrors will be armoured threats, so they absolutely do fill a useful spot in this roster and get the B rank. Sitting next to them in B tier are the Marauder Horsemen of Zinch, and they definitely do perform better than the rest of the Marauders in this roster because they provide a role that nothing else does, being the only missile cavalry that the Zinchians get. Sure, they only have 16 rounds and the damage isn't that great, but those javelins inflict warp flame, decreasing armor by 10 and inflicting 10% more fire damage. So every single ball of fire that your Pink Horrors throw at them is doing 10% more. Excellent synergy, and let's not forget this also applies to your Tzeentch and fire spells. At 90 speed they should be able to kite around with relative impunity, but you're going to be needing something with a bit more damage before you know it. Finishing off the cavalry, we're in tier 4 now, and tier 4 is the biggest thing working against the Chaos Knights of Zinch, and they're obviously meant to be discouraged as a playstyle. The fact you have to actually be a schemer in the early turns and be calculated and build yourself up, you will get access to the insane late game units we have yet to get to, but the Chaos Knights of Zinch, they are just in a really rough place. They could easily be in B tier if they were unlocked a tier earlier, but that'd be a bit too strong and make a lot of other units redundant, so I think they do fit here, but unfortunately they are just simply outclassed, particularly the non-lance variant. Now the lance comes with a meaty 80 charge bonus, which will do a lot of damage, and despite the fact this unit doesn't have armor piercing, which really does work against it, only 17 of its 53 damage is armor piercing, which at tier 4 isn't quite going to cut it. They're still very defensible, 120 armor with a shield blocking 30% of all the shots, so they can get in there, and that massive charge bonus will add onto their 53 weapon strength and deal a hell of a lot of damage for those 13 seconds, pull them back, recharge their shields, and then charge them back in again. But the regular version, it does have 50 melee defense, which is really impressive and really nice, but you have to ask, what is it for and what is the context of the army it's in? And really at this point, cycle charging is the only thing that's going to deal enough damage to make up for a lack of armor piercing. Tier 4 is when Tzeentch is finally starting to see its incredibly powerful endgame units, and this just simply doesn't stand a chance. Now let's not forget the Chaos Chariot of Zinch, but also not waste too much time on it. It does have 18 anti-infantry, but it doesn't have armor piercing, has a good charge bonus, and will basically do what chariots do, but is it what you really need with a Zinchian army? Not really at this point. Another reason the chariot is D tier is if you want one, your exalted hero can ride one. It doesn't deal anything special, and soon it'll be running from as many things it wants to hunt. Oh boy, am I being overly harsh? Who knows? Oh Elvin, you said you were done putting things in the banished tier, but honestly, this unit being tier 3, again, might have been excusable. Tier 4, the Warruners Inch, absolutely is something you should never ever hire, because you can get it as a mount for your cultists and a mount for your sorcerers. The only reason you want one of these around is because it enhances your spell power, but why would you not bring a hero that stands on top of it, which brings so much more to the table than just those aforementioned buffs? So get heroes, put them on shrines, never bring an empty shrine. Now from the barracks of your mortal units, you will need this building at tier 4 to increase the number of this hero, but you can still hire your first one at tier 3, and that is the Exalted Hero of Zinch. Your typical frontliner, which can bolster the training of your entire army and can choose one of 3 excellent commander abilities, very hard to turn down, plus 5% casualty replenishment for your entire army, really useful, as well as even more bonuses to the training. You also get 3 options, mutually exclusive, that relate to your Zinchian faction, and once again there's one which really does stand out, and that is Fated Protection, increasing your barrier replenishment rate for the entire army by 15%. Level him up, just keep on smashing that melee defense as hard as you can, and keep on putting points in there, and you will get him over 60 melee defense, making him a good line holder. He has good armor, and then it's double down on his hit points, his armor, and then finally we've got to one of the most important units in the entire roster, and that is the Chaos Warrior of Zinch. I cannot stress how vital this unit is to the entire faction, and unfortunately you do need the Champions of Chaos DLC to unlock and gain access to this, as well as most of the mortal units. This unit is an absolute defensive titan in the early game, and nothing will get past it. This provides the perfect frontline for your Pinkoros to sit and lob fire from behind. Being mortal and survivable means you will keep these guys around for a really long time, but most of all, these guys are comparatively quite cheap. For a 100-man unit that is armored this well, their only weakness is they don't dish that much damage back, but that's not why you need them. Dealing damage is not a problem that Tzeentch has. Staying safe is, and that makes this one of the most critical units in the entire roster. And yes, I did even think about putting in an S tier, but S tier has to really be something quite special, and it didn't quite get there. So just consider that and just how powerful this unit is. And even into the mid and late game, once you get this building up to tier 5, you will gain access to the Chosen of Zinch. Significantly higher melee stats, 20 more armor. They basically chaos a little bit better than the Chaos Warriors do. If it's late game and you have the money, absolutely get this unit in place of Chaos Warriors without a second thought. However, consider the notion of keeping Chaos Warriors as a cheaper front line. Have 3 units of those in the front line and then keep a couple of Chosen with Hellbirds in the back. This is a great way of spreading your economy. As I always say, your army only needs to be as strong as it needs to beat the enemy. Every cent overinvested is a cent you could have spent on your empire or another army. Unless I'm in the very, very late stages of the game, I stick with Chaos Warriors and I support them with some armor piercing variants. Now, which armor piercing variants? Well, you might be surprised to see that I'm placing the Chaos Warriors with Halberds only in B tier. Yes, they do deal some good damage, but you don't get them until tier 4. By the time you reach tier 4, you are starting to get some very damn good armor piercing options on the table. Additionally, whilst they do deal good damage, having a bit better melee stats would make them able to deal with almost anything. And dealing with almost anything is what our next S tier entry does, and that is the Chosen with Halberds. This unit is glorious. A defensive infantryman with very offensive capabilities. Like anything marked of Zinch, magic attacks are carving through all of their physical protections. 31 of their 46 damage is armor piercing with a 26 bonus versus large on top of that. These will shred anything that dares attack your back line. More importantly, once your ranged units have downed any of their flies, send your trusty halberdiers around the flanks and they will carve up anything they get close to. If you think Chosen would be just a little bit cooler if they were riding a Disc of Zinch, then look no further than the Doom Knights of Zinch. Enjoying all the same protections, including carrying a shield which blocks 55% of whatever comes at them. They also carry a lance which deals a whopping 80 damage. The unit only contains 24 models and travels with 95 speed and has a 72 charge bonus, so it will hit very, very heavily and can get out relatively quickly compared to some flying units. Yes, it does require micro, but yes, it will also severely wreck anything it gets into. I only ever bring one, but honestly, you only need one. You might want to consider bringing a couple of them in Acold Hellbrass's army. He grants them damage reflection, so when they cycle charge, they are going to bite that much harder. So we've talked about the armor, we've talked about the cavalry, now let's talk about the key damage dealers in the Zinchian forces. You only need a few of them, but they make up in power what they have in numbers, and these are the Flamers. And let's start off with the stock standard Flamers, recruitable at tier 3, and an easy S tier unit. Now this is a very difficult unit to keep alive. Have them nested slightly behind your front ranks of Chaos Warriors, and once the battle starts, consider peeling them back even more. Each unit only has 12 models, and that's a good thing. Deploy them in a small square and you will get each of them unleashing Fire of Zinch and just melting anything they shoot at. 90 damage is very good for a flame weapon, with the Warp Flame rule, so it gives an extra 10% weakness to fire and strips them of 10 of their armor. Especially while you're learning, only bring 2 of these in any given army. You'll find they're very difficult to use and to keep alive, but as soon as you get the knack of them, they will be your MVP in all of your early to mid game battles, I can promise you that. Whilst the regular Flamer is the counter for basically any type of infantry, the Exalted Flamer specializes almost solely in taking out monsters, lords, heroes, other single entities, or very small and elite units. Unlike your regular Flamers, which are a group of 12, this is a single monstrous unit, blasting over 1,000 damage at anything it aims at. The range is 150, so it can even outrange some archers in this game. But do not put this straight on your front line. I actually start this in my second rank, almost in reserve. Keep them back for that opportune shot, and when you see that lord, you see that hero or monster with a straight shot, even just a single blast will strip them of so many hit points. This is a utility unit of patience. Do not keep it unguarded at the front. In the center of your army, to move in position when you see the opportunity is how to use it. Again, you only want 1 or 2. You do not want armies that are too dependent on Flamers, because catastrophe can loom very quickly. Now moving on to the more advanced Flamer units, they're pretty much the same as you've seen, but they just fly around on discs. Next we have in A tier, the Changebringers. They have the mobility to go around and pick their placed shots and deal a ton of damage wherever you want it, whenever you want it. Just like the regular flamers, well placed shots can decide entire battles, and you have even more opportunity to land those decisive shots. The downside is, well, they're flamers. If they run out of ammo, then they're not going to do the hell of a lot for you, so make sure those shots do count. But like so many things, if used properly to its potential, this sits up there strong in A tier. Next we have the tier 5 Burning Chariot of Zinch. Similar to the Changebringer, we now have an Exalted Flamer riding upon a Chariot of Zinch. As one might expect, riding upon a chariot does also bring some other benefits in the form of more melee damage. Finally, a flaming unit that can actually do some damage after it's run out of its basic ammunition. But let's not forget that basic ammunition is absolutely devastating to any single entity, so this is an incredible Lord Sniper, a great monster hunter. Just make sure you pick your shots really well with it. Line yourself up cleanly, make those shots decisive, and after you can also cycle charge in with an armor piercing chariot. Again, not a unit you need to spam, a bit micro intensive, but can turn the tide of battle by taking out the enemy's most valuable units. Now, I previously mentioned that economy really is your earliest concern with Tzeentch, but you can also increase growth and gain massive benefits. There is one province you absolutely want to power up to tier 4 as quickly as possible, and that is your starting province. Bolster your growth and economy to get up to tier 4 as quickly as possible, ensuring by the time you reach tier 4, you have the barracks at tier 3, as well as a tier 3 library building. This means once your capital reaches tier 4, you can immediately upgrade the library. This structure is needed to unlock Occult Hellbird, whilst the library is required for the blue Scribes. These lovable nutjobs are incredibly powerful just due to the buffs they provide pink and blue horrors. If you want to spam horrors, especially exalted pink horrors, combined with the blue Scribes, will punch way above their weight. Additional skills will increase the barrier, the leadership, the campaign movement range of the entire army. You can increase the damage that the blue Scribes themselves, but their signature ability is any spell they cast will randomly give them a pool of 6 random spells across any discipline, including the Law of Zinch. But here's the trick that I've employed, is I only get the Law of Life for the first, several turns. I will literally have level up icons sitting there doing nothing until I feel confident, because the ability to heal is so important. Having your characters tank to protect your more frail and fragile demonic units can be a really big game changer. The Law of Zinch has excellent damage dealing capability. Kairos can level up and gain a weapon that provides regrowth, put the blue Scribes in another army, and you will also have healing spells. Once you have enough points to finish this tree, get Scrolls of the Apocalypse, because Cataclysm spells are just fun. Our next legendary hero available around tier 4 is Occult Hellbird, a formidable fighter on the front lines and providing some much needed healing and other bonuses amongst your army. Replenishment is just the beginning of it. He can also increase the healing cap of your entire army. He works excellent with Chaos Warriors by giving an extra 20% to movement speed, closing the ground, provides various healing as well as vigor recovery, but what I really love is putting a couple of Doom Knights with him. The damage reflection ability is really nice. And let's be honest, the Windblade ability is one of the coolest attacks in the entire game. Focus on his defensive abilities and you will have a tanky frontliner that can handle anything. Next we have the Chaos Sorcerer of Zinch, and Chaos Sorcerers are always excellent. They have a ton of armor, are defensible, and of course have magic, one of the most destructive forces in the entire game. What more could you want? As previously mentioned, I like to have my iridescent horrors under the School of Metal, and then that leaves the Zinchian lore for the Chaos Sorcerers. You can split it whichever way you like. You'll want to focus on the obligatory spell line, going to Arcane Conduit as you would with any other caster, as well as the 3 unique abilities. They're all mutually exclusive. All of these are really nice, and an extra cast of Fireball or some extra barrier replenishment won't go amiss. Probably not your first choice. You can go hellbent on making him quite tanky in melee for what he does. The Disc of Zinch is a perfect mount for a caster. Small, nimble, fast, just perfect to rain metal or Zinchian magic down on the enemy, and further to that, you can keep them back defensively on a Chaos War Shrine, increasing the magical potency of your army. Speaking of magic, the Lord of Change is the most iconic unit in the Zinchian roster, and it is absolutely deserving to be at the front of S tier, but this does need some explanation. They don't start off this way, which is why I always recommend taking capitals and building the research building. This will provide the grimoires and research you need to power through your research tree. As you get to the end, you will get several bound spells, the powerful spells, Vortex spells, attached to each Lord of Change. So if you want simple formations, start off the game with a couple of Screamers on your flanks, replace them with the Cockatrice, and then replace them with Lords of Change, providing both flanking and devastating casting. However, if all that casting and micro is a little bit too much for you, you can always go with the Mutalith Vortex Beast. This is another Shadows of Change unit, and you don't need this one, but if you do field it, boy is it going to absolutely clean up shop. With melee attack and defense stats only in the 40s, it doesn't look that impressive off the bat, but it does a hell of a lot of damage. Big armor piercing damage with an anti-infantry bonus, gift of mutation boosting the melee attack of all nearby units, direct damage to all nearby units, and to top it all off, some excellent attack animations which make absolute mincemeat of anything that's around them. This can provide an excellent centerpiece to pin the enemy units around and then rain death down from above with your casters. Whilst you don't need this unit, fielding one in your late game armies will probably ensure you never lose again. And finally, also joining the ranks of Legendary is the Soul Grinder of Tzeentch, a four-legged monstrosity that does what Soul Grinders do best, grab lots of infantry and turn them into pace. But don't forget, there is a pretty damn nice ranged attack. You start off with 15 rounds of 500 damage ammunition on this bad boy, and even better, it has a 40 anti-large bonus. The insane range on this weapon makes the Soul Grinders of Zinch an unrivaled frontline behemoth for whichever lord takes them. Not falling far behind cavalry in speed and enjoying 90 armor on top of their obligatory 20% physical resistance, they are a force to be reckoned with, but just remember they are a single, relatively large unit, so they will take some fire. And the thing I love most about these guys is they synergize in a multitude of different builds, but essentially anything in this top S tier of tier 5, you can put a couple in any army and it will only do good things for you. Last up, we have the unique units that come in the Changeling campaign from completing his schemes. They are a Bloated Corpse, a Carnosaur, a Steam Tank, and a Chaos Frost Dragon, previously exclusive only to Norsca. While some don't synergize that well with the Zinchian playstyle, they're still nice to have and absolutely worth getting. And that's it for the Zinchian tier list. The cult reworks have just made this an absolute treat to make. I think I've grinded harder on this particular race, harder than anyone in recent memory, and I really do hope you guys give it a chance. I know this is more of a niche faction, and you get a bit worried sometimes spending this much time on a faction that maybe not everyone's interested in, but so far I'm absolutely stoked. So many people seem to be interested in giving these guys another try. Also, the cult rework has influenced all of the other Chaos Gods, so if you want us to try this out with Nurgle, let me know. If you want a Zinch mastery guide which covers the entire race with a bit of lore and context thrown in there, also please let me know in the comments. Appreciate all the support. Thank you for putting up with my ruined voice, and I'll see you next time.